Welcome to rePROs Fight Back, a podcast on all things related to sexual and reproductive health rights and justice. Hey rePROs, how's everybody doing? I'm your host, Jenny Wetter, and my pronouns are she, her. So y'all, I have been revisiting the Usher catalog ever since the Super Bowl halftime show, and it has been bringing me so much joy. Like, I have just really loved going back and listening to all of the songs from when I was younger and just like reliving going out dancing to all of them. And yeah, it's just been making me so happy. I'm kind of loving being in that age group that they're now catering to, like all of the songs that were popular and all of the artists that were popular when I was younger. It's been so much fun the last couple of years. Let's see here. Anything else new and exciting? I mean, not really. I have a really exciting interview next week with an author, and I need to finish reading her book. And like, it's not like I'm dragging on it because I'm not enjoying it. I just am like struggling to find the time to sit down to give it my absolute full attention because it is so good, y'all. I cannot wait to talk about it. I cannot wait to have her on, but also I have to get it finished, and I will. It's just, I need to like sit down and make it happen. Let's see what else is new and exciting. I don't feel like much. I feel like I've been a little bit in a cocoon and just being kind of quiet and chill. And I think part of it is like, like your body just kind of knows. Like this weekend was the 1 year anniversary of my dad dying. So like, I think like my body is just like, take the time to just like curl into a ball with a good book and like have cozy snuggle time with the kitties and just take some downtime. And I think that's what's happening right now. And but it's okay. I sent my mom some flowers to give her something to smile for on that day. And I hope it helps. It's been a wild year, but it's hard to believe that it has been a year. Anyhow, let's not dwell. But yeah, it's just been a lot. I think with that, let's just turn to this week's interview. Y'all, I had so much fun with this week's interview. She was amazing, and I am so excited for y'all to hear it. I had on Lexis Dotson-Dufault with the Abortion Fund of Ohio, talking about, honestly, a huge range of things. But she tells her abortion story. We talk about her work with the Abortion Fund of Ohio. We talk about issue 1. We talk about so many things. So let's just turn to my interview with Lexi. Hi, Lexi. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Before we get started, would you like to introduce yourself and include your pronouns?
Absolutely. Hey, y'all. My name is Lexis, but you can call me Lexi. Lexis Dotson-Dufault. I am the Executive Director of Abortion Fund of Ohio, Ohio's only statewide abortion fund. I'm calling in from Columbus, Ohio, but I was born and raised in Springfield, Massachusetts. I'm a Northeastern baby. It is true. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here, really happy to chat with y'all. Yeah.
I have to say, first of all, y'all, if you are not following the Abortion Fund of Ohio on social, you are missing out because their social is amazing.
Our comms homie, Sam, she's not playing around.
She's good.
She's doing, I love it. I can't just wait for the Valentine's Day drops. Oh, y'all will see it by then. But yes, we have our Valentine's Day drops, our little memes or whatever. I'm really excited. I even contributed to one of them. So yeah, be on the lookout for those.
I'm really excited. Ooh, can't wait to see that tomorrow. So like we're obviously talking before Valentine's Day.
Yes.
Yeah. And so we took advantage of Valentine's Day, and like our episode that came out today was on pleasure because what else do you talk about in the episode before Valentine's Day of like, why don't we talk about pleasure more in talking about sexual and reproductive health?
Yes, I'm going to have to listen to that one. I love talking about all things sex.
Right.
Anything sex. I grew up in a very conservative household. I grew up with some elderly grandparents who raised me from the South and also went to a Catholic school from kindergarten till 12th grade. And
Ooh.
so I never talked about sex.
No,
I didn't know anything about
I did
sex.
K through 8, and I
Mm,
mentioned in this episode, had sex ed from a nun, so pleasure was not on the, like,
no.
no,
Not
no,
on the agenda at all,
no.
ever. Yeah, when I got, I mean, I feel like shout out to Lifetime and like MTV and VH1 and for all my sex knowledge. That really held me through until I went to college and started talking to people about sex.
Yeah, I feel like so ours was called Valuing Your Sexuality, which clearly sounds very, progressive and like you're going to learn anything helpful. But then when I went to high school, like I clearly missed when the public high school had done any of their like sex ed stuff. So I just fell into like that huge gap of like, I guess you'll figure it out as you go. Good luck.
Right. Yeah, I remember when I had my first abortion. Well, when I found out I was pregnant, and I was like, "What the fuck?" Like, oh my god, if you have sex, like you actually get pregnant. Like, what is this? Yeah, it was very interesting. I'm sure I'll talk about it in this
Okay.
little time together.
So let's talk about the Abortion Fund of Ohio. You want to tell us a little bit about it and like your path there? Because you told me you started there as an intern.
Yes, I started as an intern. So I'll give just a little background of my whole life. So yeah, I grew up in Massachusetts, born and raised. I was raised by my grandparents. And from a really early age, I was dealing with a lot of, you know, social things that happen to people because our country's fucked up. And so I always had kind of this like background. Like I always knew something was off, something was wrong with what was happening in my life. And so I did grow up like having this like justice lens, like what is happening? I have to figure it out. And I was in foster care, and so and my mom was in and out of incarceration, and so I grew up with this very like I mean, you could say hatred of the state. I knew that these systems were coming in and tearing up my family, and I didn't know maybe the specifics, but I just knew that like this can't be the answer, separating people from their family. And so when I went to college, I signed up for, at the time it was called the Reproductive Rights Activist Service Corps. Yeah, I think RASCI, they call it RASCI, through Hampshire College, which was an internship program. And they basically worked with nonprofits throughout the country, and placed students with these nonprofits for the summer. And so when I applied to it, I was very focused on the organizations that they partnered with, that were doing abolition work, prison justice work. And I had just written down Abortion Fund of Ohio as one of my choices because I had family in Ohio. And I was like, okay, I won't have to pay for rent. Like, I don't really know anything about abortion. Like I said, went to a Catholic school from kindergarten till I graduated high school. So I didn't know, anything about sex, anything about abortion. The most I knew was that I guess if you had an abortion, you were going to hell. But like I said, I always kind of had like, with my upbringing, I always just kind of understood that people need to do whatever they need to do to get by. So I was always like, I don't care what you do. Like, that's not my kid. Like, I was very, but still not very pro-abortion, but very like pro-choice. Like, I don't care what people do, but like
stigma
yes,
that you like
yes,
just when you're like in that environment that just like gets into your bones, that you're like,
right,
like the stuff I'm still like trying to like get rid of is wild.
Yeah, like, I don't care if other people have an abortion, but I'm not going to have an abortion, not me. Like, I remember thinking that when I was 16 years old. And so I'm applying for this internship and whatnot. And after I apply to it, waiting to hear back if I'm going to get in or not. And I find out I'm pregnant. And the way I found out I'm pregnant is pretty wild. My best friend, she had a pack of 100 pregnancy tests from Amazon, and she was down to her last one. And me, I'm just like, ha ha ha, I'm just gonna take this. Not thinking I was pregnant in any way, shape, or form. I was just like, I'm gonna get this off your hands. And I went into the bathroom and I peed on this little stick, and that shit turned positive in literally like 30 seconds. So I'm freaking out. I Google, bet. I'm like, what happens if your pregnancy test turns positive very quickly? And they're like, Google's like, well, you're pregnant with twins. So I don't know what to tell you. So now I'm freaking out. I'm sitting there. I'm pregnant with twins, according to Google. And I just remember, like, my first thought being like, oh my God, like, I'm not ready to be a parent. Like, I do not want to be a parent. Like, I was going through, a lot with school. I was working, taking care of my brothers. I was in a domestically, violent situation. And so I just did not, I didn't want to be a parent. I knew that, but, because of everything that I had grown up learning, all the stigma, not having anyone that I knew that had an abortion, at the time, having an abortion didn't even seem like an option. So, like, I was just like, I guess I'm having this child that I don't want. And I remember, I got severely sick with my pregnancy. So this time I'm like, I guess I'm having a baby, blah, blah, blah. And I just remember, getting very sick very quickly. I lost 30 pounds the month I was pregnant. Remember telling, because I'm living with my grandparents at this time, I'm telling them that I have mono, and, trying to fight with my campus administration to, like, let me be absent. And, my OBGYN wasn't trying to see me. I was calling, I was like, I'm very sick. And they were like, we can't see you until you're 10 weeks. And I was like, what? I found out I was pregnant at 4 weeks. So I found out very early.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, I'm having this baby. And I remember, like, maybe the next week after I found out I was pregnant, oh yeah, and at the time I'm not telling anyone. I'm just like, I don't even know who to tell. Like, I can't tell my grandparents. I'm like, don't even want to tell my friends. Like, I don't know what to do. And I remember the next week I actually got accepted to intern at the Abortion Fund of Ohio. So I'm like, okay, like, I guess I'm going to intern at this Abortion Fund of Ohio and be pregnant because I'm still having this baby. Because even though I found out I'm going to do this, like, the thought is still not a thought to me.
Right. No.
And so, yeah, I go on my way, keep being pregnant. And I remember I went to the conference that they call it Collective Power now, the internship program I did. I remember they had a conference, and I go to the conference, and I'm sitting there pregnant, just wishing I wasn't pregnant, but not going to get an abortion. And organization called We Testify had some storytellers that were talking. And I just remember listening to this one storyteller, Jordan Close. She is also the Deputy Director of OWA, Ohio Women's Alliance, and also the board president of Abortion Fund of Ohio. Did not know her at the time, but listening to her speak, and she basically was just like, I had an abortion. It was cool. It was the best thing I ever did for myself. I have no regrets, and I would do it again. And that is all I needed to hear. That was just the one thing I needed to hear. And I went out in my car and I called Planned Parenthood right then and there. And fast forward, me and her are now best friends. She's living my life. So it really cute 180 little, or 360, I guess that would be the term, little 360 that we had. And yeah, so I went out, called Planned Parenthood, made my appointment, and I went and had an abortion maybe a week or two later. And I remember I had a medication abortion, and I remember my best friend came over. I told my grandpa we were doing homework or something, and we watched Beyonce's Homecoming on Netflix.
Perfect.
And I took the pills, and I just remember, it was very painful for me. I didn't have the best experience. Also, I'm very young. I wasn't, that very sexually active. I'd never been to the OBGYN before. So I didn't have that much experience down there. So I did have a pretty uncomfortable, the process. But I remember just when the pregnancy passed, just having the most immense sense of relief, just being like, thank fucking God, I'm not pregnant anymore. I don't have to do this. I don't care if I'm going to hell. I don't care if I'm a horrible person. I just don't have to feel like this anymore. And I don't have to think about raising a child right now. And that's what I felt at first. And then immediately after, very depressed because I just had all this stigma around me. I don't feel like I have anyone to talk to. I feel like I'm a horrible person. I feel like I had this duty to if I was having sex, then I need to raise a child and blah, blah, blah. And it really, took, a few months later, I went to Ohio, met everyone at Abortion Fund of Ohio and in the repro community in Ohio. And it really took being in that community to really be able to undo a lot of that internalized stigma, because I was able to, look at all these other people who had had abortions and be like, you're amazing. Like, I love you. You're great. And then I had to ask myself, why can't I feel that way about myself? Like, they're not any different from me. Like, we both had abortions. Like, it's okay. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about how I got into it. And I came when I first started interning with Abortion Fund of Ohio. I was doing community outreach work, and one of my main tasks was to work with the other patient navigator at the time, Michelle, to create kind of like a case management program. Before that, we were just doing block grants to clinics to fund people's abortions. So me and Michelle created, the case management one-on-one interaction with patients, and that has served, close to at least 10,000 people to this day. And so started on that, went back to school, finished school, moved to Ohio, joined the board of directors, started as an employee, continuing the work that I had done as an intern, moved to program manager as we hired new staff, and now I'm the executive director. So that, it's been a ride, but it all started with me having an abortion. And, I hold that close to me. I think it's really important on my team for the members of our direct service, our patient facing team, to also be abortion havers, people who've had abortions. I think, that does make a huge impact in the work that we do. And, people know that, okay, the information's out there. If you can find it that are, the people you're talking to are abortion storytellers, I hope that makes you feel good. I hope it makes you feel good that the person helping you has also had an abortion, so you don't feel that alone.
Well, yeah, because that's what I was just thinking, like with your story, like how important it was that you went to a conference where there was an abortion storyteller who told their story, because it helped you let go some of that stigma enough to be like, oh, actually, I can do this.
Right, right, yeah. And, when I was, picking my team and picking, who I wanted to, with me moving away from talking to patients, who did I trust to really do that work? And, in interviewing people, it really was the people that had abortions, people who, identify with a lot of the people that contact us, Black women, young people, poor people. Like, those are the identities that a lot of the people contacting us have. And I think that's very important to be reflected in the work that we do.
So much happened in Ohio in this last year. Do you want to talk a little bit about the ballot initiative and and where are we now?
Yeah, so we had, I remember the day that Roe was overturned, that June, and it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. Ohio went for almost 3 months, without access at all. Thankfully, that, ban was blocked in a court, or held up in a court for a long time. But I remember what it was like for us not to have care and have to navigate hundreds of people out of state. And I'm sure there are people that now have children that they were not planning to have, because we did not have access to care, and because there are, people don't understand the barriers that go into actually obtaining an abortion. And so, yeah, we saw just an absolute increase in need in the people that we were caring for, especially with the loss of access in Indiana and Kentucky and a lot of the South. I don't necessarily believe that any state is a haven state, but in a state where there's more access than other states, people aren't usually looking at Ohio as that state. When you're looking at a map and looking at who does not have access, Ohio is the first stop for a lot of people. So we saw, I want to say, oh my gosh, let me pull the actual number because it was ridiculous. We saw 4,500 people in 2023. And let me see, in 2022, we supported 1,200 people. So
Wow.
that
That's a
increase,
huge
we went
increase.
from, yes, in 2021 we saw 900. So we went in 2022 1200 to 2023 4500 in funding, almost $1.5 million. We are a small team at like we have less than 10 employees. We're just a bunch of gals trying to get people abortions. So we're doing a lot, and so you know yes, we won the election. Yes, abortion is in our constitution. That is not taking away the numerous other barriers that we still have. And, the cost of care has just increased so rapidly, so dramatically. Um, Abortion funds, we can't sustain that. It's not, the donations aren't coming in the way that they were the minute Roe fell. We blew through that money in months because look at how many people need help. And we don't get funding like a lot of these larger legacy organizations, but yet we're holding so much of this work on our back. So it really does take a strain on you. And for the first time, AFO had to pause our funding last month. We actually just reopened funding in February, simply because we didn't have the dollars to do it. And I think it's hard to depend on grassroots donations to fund abortion because a lot of the people that support us are also in poverty. They are also struggling financially. Look at our economy. Everyone is pretty broke right now. This is where a time where I really think, institutions and really large funders need to be trusting abortion funds more and really not restricting the money they give us. And, what good is you giving me all this money for overhead and for this and that and everything but funding abortion? I think, we have a problem with funders really wanting to or give us money to fund abortion. They'll donate or they'll give us money for anything else, but it's something weird when it comes to actually giving money for people to receive health care. And I think it's time for us to have a serious conversation about why that is, and how can we move beyond that. Yeah, but you were asking. Yeah, the election was what a wild time.
I was so
The
excited for
special
y'all. You
election.
all did so much work, and like it was nonstop because you had the two, and like you worked your butts off, and like
Yeah.
and you won, and it was amazing.
Yes. And shout out to Ohio Women's Alliance, one of the only Black-led RJ organizations in Ohio that got Black voters and brown communities and young people out to vote. I think being a young Black leader in this space, especially someone who's had multiple abortions, I think a lot of times we are left out of these conversations. We're left out of leadership positions. We're left out of, the important, decision making that is impacting us as Black women the most. And thinking about the ballot and thinking about the work that had to be done by Black women and Black organizers because white leaders were just not listening to us. We know our communities best. We don't need other people making decisions on our behalf. That's why I said shout out to Ohio's Women's Alliance, because they did the very intentional work on making sure that Black and brown communities were reached out to and engaged in doing that community education. They made sure that young people were informed and knew what was going on. That, the legacy orgs, the white-led orgs, they were not trying to do that. Like, they were not, trying to put in the work to the communities that are impacted the most by these restrictions, by these bans. And, the poll showed what that work meant. It was like 83, I want to say, percent of Black voters showed out and voted yes on issue one. Yeah, 77% of voters under 30 voted yes on issue one. I think young people, Black and brown communities are constantly seen as like disenfranchised, that, they don't come out to vote. They don't care about these issues. That's not true. That's not true. When you give these people something real and tangible to like vote on, we're going to show out. But yeah, why would we show out for these policies that don't give a fuck about us, that don't have us in mind? And in the ways, with the election that just some of the language, the way messaging impacts, just based off my story. I was going to continue a pregnancy if I hadn't heard someone share their story. The way that we are speaking about abortion is very important. I'm not trying to hear stuff, reasonable limits, too many abortions.
Ugh.
I'm not trying to hear that, but there's a reason why that works. There's a reason why that works, because we haven't done, these orgs with all this money. They're not doing the actual on the ground community education that we need to do to overcome a lot of this stigma in the community. You can't pop out 1 minute after Roe goes and say, okay, now we're going to transform all these things overnight. Like, no, this is, Black and brown organizers have been doing this stuff for years and years and years. We've known Roe wasn't enough. We knew it was also going to come down. We've been saying, no, we have to mobilize now. We have to get in our communities now. And I think the real big difference is we're not following respectability politics. I'm not trying to hear that. Like, that's not saving nobody. That's not saving nobody. I'm not trying to appeal to the swing voter. I'm trying to appeal to the people actively going and getting abortions, or going to get a third trimester abortion right now. I want them to know that that's okay. I want people to know that, I'm not trying to have, yes, absolutely, rape, sexual assault, domestic violence, like my situation. Those are absolutely valid reasons for having an abortion. That is not the main reason people are having abortions. So why are we making that the poster story for every time we're talking about abortion? Because you know how that made me feel when I went to have my abortion? Like, maybe my reason isn't good enough because I wasn't raped. So I don't know, maybe I have to hesitate and think about it. No, these are things that have real impacts beyond a campaign. So I just really wish people would fight back on these narratives a little more.
Yeah, it's really that like narrative of like unsaid, but like felt by people, like that there are good abortions and bad abortions, when there are just abortions and healthcare you need and need access to, need to be able to get without all of these barriers, including financial barriers. Like, this is just wild that we still are having all of that stigmatizing language out there. Something else that I thought of as you were talking is the campaign I've seen a bunch of the reproductive justice groups launching, that I think if some people just see it, may not quite understand. And you did a good job of starting to articulate it. So, like, let's talk about it real quick. The Let Roe Go. And I think that's really important to talk about, because I think maybe people who aren't familiar with some of these conversations might be like, oh, what is that about? That feels like it could be a problem.
Oh, yeah.
When it's really important.
They was not happy.
Yeah.
They was not happy with our Let Roe Go one. That's why I love our cause person. She be dropping shit, and I'm like, that's gonna cause an uproar. I'm into it. Yes, we've got to let Roe go, y'all. It didn't help us. It did not help us. Yes, like it's like asking the man for a bare minimum, like, I guess, but
this
you're doing all these other items.
Did not start when Roe fell, right? I've been doing this for 6+ years because there were problems accessing care way before then, way before I started this. Basically from the day Roe happened, right?
Right. I mean, AFO has been around for 30+ years. There's a reason why abortion funds exist, regardless of Roe. Black people, brown people, young people, disabled people, or trans homies, like, they have always had issues accessing abortion care. What was Roe doing? How many bans did Ohio push through in the last 30 years? What was Roe doing? Like, we have to not want to settle for something that isn't serving us. We should not have to settle for the bare minimum access to care. We have to think bigger. We have to do bigger. We have to do more. As long as one person is not able to access care, we're not doing enough. Well, there's more work to be done. And I think this is, for people that might have an issue with letting Roe go, please go listen to some abortion storytellers that had to access care with Roe. The stories I've heard, the people I've talked to, it's horrific what people have to do. People having to put down payments on a home to access care that could kill them. And even if it couldn't kill them, they still shouldn't have to do that. Like, we have 3, I want to say 3? third trimester clinics in the whole country. Like, come on. Like, what was Roe doing for us? Like, I'm not settling for the bare minimum. Not settling for the bare minimum at all. And I think, this is also an important time for people to really be learning about reproductive justice, because there's such a big difference. There's such a big difference. It was created because Black women recognized that these movements were not working for us. And I really love reproductive justice. I just remember, like, when I first learned what it was, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like, there's a name for all the things I've been thinking, like how everything is connected. Oh my gosh, there's a movement for this. I freaking love this. It all made sense once I learned about reproductive justice.
And it just
so
feels
learn it, folks.
so
It'll change your life.
basic, right? Like,
it's so it does, but it's like
huge, but like so simple.
Right. It's like, yeah, everyone should just be able to live healthily and safely. Yeah. But when it's interesting. It's just interesting, a lot of people had stuff to say about our Palestine statements and you're an abortion fund. Why are you even speaking on this? Like, because you can't live safely if you're being bombed and starved and things like that. So, like I said, reproductive justice, people, reproductive justice. I'm not trying to hear all that. That's why, we work, cross movements. Reproductive justice is all the movements. So I really think now is the time for us to continue our work cross movement and, bringing people along and showing them, hey, abortion impacts what you're doing because X, Y, and Z. Reproductive justice is your movement because X, Y, and Z. You can't show me any problem in the world, and I promise I'll connect it back to reproductive justice. So, yeah. Whenever someone tries to argue with me, it really just comes down. I'm like, I don't know. Do you know, or do you follow reproductive justice? Intersectionality? You don't know about that? Go look it up. Come back to me. Back to me, babe.
Okay. So I always like to wrap up with, like, not just talking about all the problems that we tend to focus on in the podcast, but I like to give people something they can do. So what actions can people take right now to push back on what's happening or just to get more involved?
First, please donate to your local abortion fund. We need it. We need it. We're trying to get people care. Please say the word abortion. Oh my God. People who are anti-abortion say the word abortion more than we do. And that is why they have claimed, like, that's why their narratives are the ones that are so pushed all the time in TV and books and any media, because they're not afraid to say it. Meanwhile, we got Joe Biden doing jumping jacks and circles and gymnastics, trying to think of every word except abortion to say. Yes, and follow Black reproductive justice leaders. We're out here telling the truth, y'all. We're out here spitting facts. Especially look and see what volunteer opportunities your local abortion fund has, if any. Hopefully in the future, Abortion Fund of Ohio will be launching some more volunteer opportunities to get folks involved. And like I said, do your research on reproductive justice. It'll change your life. It'll change the way you organize. It'll change the way you do your activism. It'll change the way you think about things. I promise.
I'm just going to add one thing, like, absolutely donate to abortion funds, but especially if you can become a monthly donor, because
yes, please.
I definitely do the rage donating and like donate to like whatever, but I also make sure that I am a monthly donor to several different places, because that way they know they can count on X amount of money each month, and it makes a huge difference in their ability to plan.
Yes, thank you so much for adding that. And one more thing I want to add. Learn about self-managed abortion,
yes.
y'all. It's safe. It's good. It's good for our communities. We can manage our abortions ourselves. Period.
Lexi, thank you so much. It has been so much fun talking to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I was happy to talk.
Okay, y'all. I hope you enjoyed my talk with Lexi. I had so much fun talking to her. And yeah, like I said, make sure you are following the Abortion Fund of Ohio's social. They really are amazing, and I really love following them on all of the platforms. So we'll have all those links in our show notes, so make sure that you jump on that. And I will see y'all next week. If you have any questions, comments, or topics you would like us to cover, always feel free to shoot me an email. You can reach me at Jennie, Jennie, at reprosfightback.com, or you can find us on social media. We're at rePROs Fight Back on Facebook and Twitter, or rePROs FB on Instagram. If you love our podcast and want to make sure more people find it, take the time to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Or if you want to make sure to support the podcast, you can also donate on our website at reprosfightback.com. Thanks all.